Hello, everybody. Welcome
Good
to the March
evening.
live stream. We've got loads for you this month. I've loads and loads.
Yep.
Before we start, a really big thank you to everybody who supports us on coffee. We've been bought loads of coffees this month. We're quite hyper. We won't be sleeping till next Tuesday.
I know I've had to go on to vodka. No, sorry, it's not vodka, it's water. It's water.
But we really do appreciate it. It certainly helps us keep the podcast on the rails and buy our equipment and stuff. Okay, shall we start with some good news? We have got some good news. The first one is that finally, one lady in particular in Glasgow is very relieved that she is no longer under investigation.
Thank you for coming along again today. Obviously, today is a day of mixed emotions for me, but I was advised earlier today that after a very thorough investigation of all of the evidence, there will be no action taken against me. In other words, I am completely in the clear. That is the outcome I would always have expected. As I have said to all of you many times, I have done nothing wrong, so I was confident of reaching at this point and getting to this outcome, but obviously it is a relief now to have that confirmed.
Yeah, about time. About bloody time, honestly.
How they can possibly have dragged that investigation out as long as they have. There's still the possibility that Peter Murrell will, if he's on trial, it could well be during 2026, during an election campaign.
But maybe the Scottish electorate can see through that kind of thing, even whether they're for independence or not. Maybe they can see through that kind of possibility. But anyway, that's really good. And also that the treasurer, Mr. Beattie, I think his name is, he was also completely, exonerated. Great. She probably cracked a bottle of something nice and, hopefully she went out with her pals. And actually, Nicola was over in Edinburgh doing a books and banter thing with Val McDermott.
The next thing that we were going to talk about, in fact, Marlene's got some information on this. We've been following with interest the developments of the Liberation.Scot campaign or application maybe, or petition. I'm not entirely sure what stage it's at. But to apply for decolonisation of Scotland, I mean, it's a totally grassroots thing, not party political at all. Marlene, you were looking a bit more, weren't you, at who decides who's a colony? Who's got colonies?
Well, it's true. I mean, it's like Liberation Scotland. They took the case to a Geneva-based group called Justice pour tous International, who looked at the case, and then that group has now formally submitted an advance notion of petition to the United Nations, and it goes to a special committee on decolonisation. It's up then to that committee to look at it a bit further and see what they think they could do. It's sort of interesting when you look at the analysis of the Geneva group. It's very much the kind of thing that we've all been saying for 10 years. But I mean, and I'm not saying that there hasn't also been an awful lot of work done to get it to this stage, but it's very familiar, denial of self-determination, colonial exploitation, as in Scotland's natural resources being systematically controlled by Westminster, historical misrepresentation of actually what the treaty was in the first place, democratic violations, as in more recently when they've just kept saying, no, you've had a referendum, you're not getting another one. So they've put that to this committee with a call to action for that committee to look at it. And the committee is called C24, don't know why. That is a list of the countries who are on this committee and who will be looking at it. And it's quite, I mean, China, India, some of them are quite big, some of them are quite small.
Some of them I've never heard of. I mean, where is Timor-Leste, and how come they get a seat on the United Nations?
Timor-Leste is quite interesting one, because Timor-Leste used to be part of Indonesia and is now independent. So there's quite a few. There's also some there that are former British colonies themselves. So you'd kind of think, they might have a bit of
sympathy or empathy.
Yeah, well, there's 17. They're called non-self-governing territories. Most of them are very small, and they're mostly islands. So, well, Gibraltar's not quite an island, but it's one of them. There is a country, Western Sahara, which is currently administered by Spain. It's just south of Morocco, but most of them are quite small island groupings. So that's where it's going to be looked at. And this committee, I mean, it is quite interesting because they are mandated to review the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples. That's their mandate for that committee. And if they decide to take the petition further, then they can send a mission to Scotland, and presumably they'd also go to other parts of the UK just to review it, to find out what we think, to check that what they've been told is right. They can organise seminars where they invite, civil society, groups from civil society, other people with an interest to talk to them. And at the very end, they can draft recommendations and a resolution to go before the General Assembly of the United Nations. So, it's quite a move.
You just wonder, though, imagine a delegation comes from that committee, how Holyrood are going to respond, because you wonder if they're going to be quietly receptive. Are they going to be appalled at this challenge to their authority? Are they going to be annoyed that it's somebody outside of government who's actually taking the initiative?
Why would that be a challenge to Holyrood's authority?
Well, because instead of letting Holyrood be the body that negotiates with the rest of the UK, or that's been them up until now, with as we know, no success, the fact that a group of people who they've no idea who these people are have gone almost behind their backs to the UN, said, come in here and decolonise us. And they're going, what? We didn't know we were a colony. I mean, I just can't imagine.
But you see, I think that's a little bit pessimistic, actually. But actually, I think it's also to the point, because it's true, it is just a small amount of people. The amount of members of Liberation and Salva is only in the thousands. Well, it is in the thousands, which says something, but it's not like a big group. So if someone comes from the UN, then they will have to talk to the broader Scottish population and sort of say, well, look, if this is just 10,000 people, say, which is probably more than they have members, but well, we're not going to do anything, are we? But on the other hand, if it's 50% of your population, so it's just it could be something that would help the independence movement and help the SNP and the Green Party and Alba.
Have they confirmed that we are, is there criteria to say that you are a colony? That's what you were saying earlier about use of your natural resources, Marlene. Have they got a list of criteria that say these are the criteria to identify territories?
We should come back to this, actually, because obviously there is so much more we could discuss on this, and those are very good questions.
Let's come back to it. But I'll just to answer what Lynne's just said. What they've done in their petition is to draw attention to the kinds of things that does indicate that a country does have its own, sense of self and institutions, and then how those institutions are not being allowed the freedom that they could have. So it's interesting. And of course, the committee might say, no, you don't come into this, which would be another awkward position to be in. Anyway, I think you're right, Fiona. Let's come back to that one.
We'll come back to it. Right, let's move on. We've got another bit of, I think it's good news, that back on the cards is
to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the deposit return scheme, including whether it will be appointing a deposit management organisation on schedule in April of 2025.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The Scottish Government remains committed to delivering an interoperable deposit return scheme with England and Northern Ireland in 2027 and continues to move ahead with preparations. We have received an industry-backed application to run Scotland's DRS, as well as the scheme in England and Northern Ireland. We are currently assessing the application jointly with the UK Government and with Northern Ireland. As an industry-run scheme, we must be assured that the applicant can deliver DRS and act on behalf of all businesses. Any appointment will be announced once the assessment concludes, which we expect to be in April.
Lorna Slater.
In November 2024, the Welsh Government announced that it would include glass in its deposit return scheme. The regulations for Scotland's DRS, passed in 2020, include glass in our scheme. Before the Minister changes those regulations to undo the will of this Parliament and remove glass from Scotland's scheme, will he explain how Wales has been able to secure an exemption to the Internal Market Act in order to implement their own scheme, which includes glass, when Scotland has not?
Minister.
Well, I've realised the member's commitment to this issue, and our question is one that would be usefully addressed to the UK government. It is not a shining example of the usefulness to Scotland of the so-called UK Internal Market Act.
Not sure he really answered the question there, did he? But I'm really pleased if the deposit return scheme is finally going to come about, because, I mean, Lynne and I, we regularly go out litter picking, don't we? And the amount of stuff that you pick up that, you know, we'd have bags worth 20, 30 quid's worth in deposits just on what we've picked up. Now, those bags are nearly all energy drinks, and it always infuriates me that people don't have the energy to take them to the bin even, but it's mainly energy drinks, and it's mainly cartons and bottles, plastic bottles. Yeah. It's outrageous. But you had some information, Lynne, didn't you, about Believe in Scotland's litter?
Yes, well, there's been quite a lot. So this looks like, yes, Prestwick, and they had an event, I believe a Scotland event down there, but they also did a litter pick, and one of their members had organised to get litter bags with yes on them, just so that when people were going around maybe seeing the collected litter, it just gave them that wee kind of association there. These are people that want independence for Scotland. Not saying that everyone that litter picks wants independence for Scotland, but it just gives you a wee kind of feeling as towards type of people we are. We want the best for our country. We want it to look nice. We want it to be good for people. We want it to be good for nature. So I had contact, I think quite a few people who go out litter picking, wherever they are, had contacted Peter and said, where did you get these bags? Because I'd like these bags. Now, much as our council will give us bags if we go out litter picking, that's great. But this is just another wee thing, just to highlight the kind of stuff we'll do. And Peter had organised a fundraiser because it was quite expensive to buy. I don't know how many he bought initially, but he decided to do a fundraiser because economies of scale, you get more bang for your buck when you've got to put more money in. So he did a fundraiser, raised £1,200.
Wow.
And lots. So I think he got 2,500 litter bags for that. So they're actually quite sturdy. He delivered them to my house on Sunday. So they're more like rubble bags. You could be putting bricks and things in them. So learning point is if they do it again, they'll maybe get a lower thickness of the bag. Doesn't need to be quite as sturdy as that, but it would certainly withstand. We've got experience of brambles ripping bags open and having to double bag. So there's a kind of yes movement nationwide on the 5th of April between 10 and 12 doing litter picks, and Peter was encouraging people to come forward and in your locality do it. So I've been organising one in Clackmannanshire, and that's the date. We've got our litter bags. We've got enough of us with pickers and hoops and things like that. We've picked a location to go out, and I've yet to contact the council, but the council have always been really good before at coming out and collecting what you've put in bags for them, you know. So I mean, it's infuriating that there's so much litter there. It's very therapeutic when you pick it up and you look at an area afterwards, but it's also infuriating that it's got to that stage in the first place.
5th of April, did you say is the date?
10 till 12, and in Clackmannanshire we're meeting maybe selfishly very close to my house, but there's a wooded area that lots of people go walking in. It's near a school. I don't want to blame the young people because there's lots of other people that walk there, dog walkers as well. But the area, the way it's set up, there's kind of 3 paths that all converge. So it's a case of we're going to split into 3 teams and each take a path and then meet up at the end of it, and then let the council know where we've got all the bags to be.
Very good.
Sounds like you've got it all organised.
We just need the people to come.
Well,
brilliant. So that was our good news highlights, or a few of them anyway, from this month. Shall we move on to the lowlights?
I wouldn't call them that.
Well,
if you've not had your tea yet or something, you know, if you're kind of feeling a bit down.
Well, we're going to go on to look at the Labour's PIP cuts, the latest lot of Labour's cuts, and the well, just ripping up the manifesto, in my opinion. But you had a great phrase, Marlene, which was, is this Labour's poll tax moment?
Yes, I mean, I can't take credit for myself, actually. It was a headline in The Guardian. They've had a few people writing in, well, Labour supporters writing in, with the kind of things that everyone up here is saying as well, but I don't recognise this Labour Party and why they're doing that. They won't tax the wealth, but they'll, decrease PIP, or at least going to make it more difficult to get. And so it was, is this Labour's poll tax moment? Because those of you old enough to remember that the poll tax, applying it in Scotland, was Mrs. Thatcher's moment when just things turned against her, and out of that came her demise as Prime Minister. And then you remembered there was the one about the Lib Dems.
Yeah, and the tuition fees that they promised they wouldn't bring in, and then as soon as they got into coalition with the Tories, promptly did bring them in. So this was our first clip on this one is actually Stephen Flynn, who's been very quiet of late. I mean, I used to watch Westminster all the time. I hardly ever bother nowadays because there's no interesting stuff in it. But this is a good question that he asked.
Mr. Speaker, they say they won't change their fiscal rules because of their manifesto. They say they won't change their tax policies because of their manifesto. They say they won't change their position in relation to the single market because of their manifesto. Perhaps the Secretary of State could outline to me and to people right across the UK where in her manifesto it stated that they were going to take £5 billion away from disabled people.
I'm very happy to send a highlighted version of our manifesto to the honourable gentleman, where we said we would reform or replace the WCA. We said we'd make sure we dealt with backlogs in access to work. We said we'd make work pay. We said we'd invest more in the NHS. We said we'd improve employment rights. We said we'd create jobs in every part of the country. I'm very proud we're delivering on it. I just asked the honourable gentleman to take a look at what's happening in Scotland and their record there, because there's probably more they could do.
The obligatory kick at the Scottish government that it's every question they answer, they have to get.
I thought he looked angry there.
Yeah.
I thought he just looked angry, didn't he? She wasn't answering the question, but he did just look.
It's even the coming back with a reply like, I'll send you the highlighted manifesto, as if to say, you clearly didn't read our manifesto properly.
But there was nothing in it that said they were going to make PIP harder to get, or get rid of winter fuel payment, or not support the WASPy women. I mean, the
way she tried to spin it, we said we were going to make this better. We said we were going to reform this, but they've not then gone into the detail of how they're going to do that, and how they're going to do that is to victimize the already vulnerable.
I suppose in these questions they and their immediate kind of supporters in the department presumably do a bit of a brainstorm, knowing the kind of questions that are going to come up. They might not know who's going to ask it, but it's probably a cert that someone was going to ask that one. Presumably, they come up with a response to it, and that's it. And if it happens to be a Scots MP, then obviously the instruction is say that, and then at the very end say, and look, the SNP and the Scottish government have made a right mess of.
And it's the fact that he then hasn't got right of reply.
Yeah, that's
that.
right.
He's got the last word.
Yeah.
I think this is quite good. This is something that was on Channel 4, but this is quite a good explanation of what PIP actually is. It's not just about unemployment for it by any means.
Around 3.6 million people get a personal independence payment, and according to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the average award is almost £7,000 a year. Now, those awards are specifically to help people facing the additional costs of living with a disability or a long-term health condition. That can be anything from higher heating bills to special equipment or transport costs. Now, before the pandemic, around 165,000 people in England and Wales were making new claims for PIP each year. By 2023, that figure had doubled to over 372,000, something successive governments, the last Conservative and this new Labour government, have described as unsustainable, hence talk of these really significant cuts. Well, according to a coalition of 16 charities, which has written an open letter to the Chancellor, a cut of this size would have a catastrophic impact on disabled people up and down the country. The charity Scope claims without PIP, 700,000 more disabled households would end up in poverty, and poverty levels are already especially high in families where someone has a disability. Now, of course, the government is framing this very much around reforming a broken welfare system. with much talk of helping people get back into work. But in targeting PIP, there is, as someone in the sector put it to me today, a breakdown in logic, because PIP is awarded to disabled people whether or not they work. And there are plenty who use their PIP to help facilitate them going to work.
Diane Abbot was really, really on good form, I think, in holding Keir Starmer to account on this.
Most members of this House will be aware that the welfare system can be a nightmare to navigate and does indeed need reform. But could we have less of this rhetoric about his £5 billion package of disability benefit so-called reform being moral? There is nothing moral about cutting benefits for what may be up to 1 million people. This is not about morality. This is about the Treasury's wish to balance the country's books on the back of the most vulnerable and poor people in this society.
That was to the point, wasn't it? And there's a great comment from Julie in the comments there that PIP, if they lose the daily element of PIP, they also lose the care payment. So these are sort
it's
of
complicated. Yeah, it is. It's straight, and it is complicated, and it's a sort of once you get PIP, it opens the door onto and to be able to get other benefits, and one of them is if you need a carer or there's an unpaid carer who becomes eligible for a carer's payment. Well, let's see. Maybe it will be Labour Party's poll tax.
I like what you did there, Fiona, though, because you didn't give Keir Starmer the right to reply to that. You just he was standing up.
Not interested in what he's got to say.
What she said about the breakdown in logic, because they want to get people into work, but people are actually using this payment to support them getting into work, and be it, they might not be able to get buses or drive, but they can get a taxi to the work, and they're using their PIP to get them into the workplace.
I mean, the other thing is that they're not giving it to any under 22-year-olds. Well, a lot of disabled young folk would be relying on that maybe to get to university or to get to college. You know, so it's sort of setting them up with a disadvantage right from.
I can't remember what way it was, but it's when they reassess people. You know, they've already gone through this traumatic process to get it, and then they say, oh, we're still checking. And I saw one online where they had to give this letter to their GP for their GP to confirm. So the GP did reply and said, yes, my patient, they've had a lower limb amputation. They suffer from phantom pain. Sometimes they are so excruciating that they cannot move, basically. And he said, and I don't anticipate anywhere in the near future that this person is going to grow their leg back. So the status quo is as already been presented to you.
Yeah, but that's it, isn't it? And partly so cruel, that setup. It's like I think it's something like every couple of years, someone who's got PIP goes in for a reassessment. And people, I mean, from when I was at Citizens Advice Bureau, folk would come in just wanting to talk about what they should say and get a bit of a help of what they should say when they do that. And people get so stressed and upset, and some people get angry. And you were just sitting there going, say, look, I understand why you're angry, but please don't get like that in the interview, because it just works against you. And actually, the Scottish government, who have taken over PIP, it's called something different up here now, isn't it?
Adult disability payment.
Yeah, and there will be some reassessments for some people getting it, but for instances like the one you've just described, or someone's got multiple sclerosis, something like that, they're not going to. The Scottish government said, once you've got it, you've got it. We won't be coming back to check in case you've miraculously got cured.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's not even going to save that much money. And Richard Murphy gives us some other ways that they could raise much more money in a much less cruel way.
I think that the benefit cuts that the government is promoting are highly abusive. The abuse comes from the fact that the government is picking on the most vulnerable people in society, those who are long-term sick unable to work in many cases, or if they can work, can only work in reduced manner, to pick up the biggest hit, which would go to the cuts that are to be imposed upon our society when other options are available. The whole point of benefits is to support the most vulnerable members of our society, and we pay them because we create a social safety net to ensure that everyone can be included in the benefits of living in this country. But if you're a pure neoliberal, you don't believe that is really necessary. You believe, as it is very clear that Starmer and Reeves and Kendall do, that those who are out of work are skiving, in essence. Maybe they've never met a person with a disability. Maybe they've never met a person with mental ill health. Maybe they've never met a person with autism so severe that they really can't function inside a normal workplace and jobs aren't available for them. Maybe they just don't understand. But I find that very hard to believe, because there are simply too many people with disabilities in our communities for them not to know about them. They must come across these people, for example, in their MP surgeries. And so their actions are almost inexplicable. And at the same time, I know that there are other options available to them if they really insist that they must balance the books. For example, the cuts that they plan will, it is said, save £5 billion a year. Let's put that in context. The UK government will next year spend at least £1,300 billion. And so £5 billion is just neither here nor there in the total scheme of things when it comes to government spending. Under 0.5% of total government spending is what we're talking about to impose this cruelty upon people. But if you did need another £5 billion, there are ample ways to find it. For example, the government could tell the Bank of England to cut the interest rate that it charges at base rate. And if it did, it would save well over £7 billion a year on its interest cost. It's entirely within its right to do that. It could equalise the tax rate on capital gains and income in the UK and raise more than £5 billion a year as a consequence. In fact, somewhat more than that sum. It could charge national insurance on all earned income in the UK at the same rate instead of cutting it down from 8% to 2% as happens now when a person goes above about £50,000 a year in income. By doing so, he could raise well over the sum required, and we would have a fairer society as a consequence.
So there you go. It's choices that they're making. Now, you asked there about the Scottish payment, and that was a question that came up in Holyrood this week as to whether the Scottish government is going to mitigate this latest change.
The Scottish Government calls on the UK Government to listen to the anger and real anxiety that they have caused to disabled people right across the UK, and to scrap the cruel reforms which drastically reduce the financial support for disabled people. As we were given no prior notice of the announcement, and as we still await many of the details of the proposals, we will scrutinise what we can to understand the impacts of devolved disability benefits and on the people who rely on this support.
Yeah, so it's just been sprung upon the Scottish Government.
Yeah, they didn't even tell them it.
And the fact that it's another thing for us to mitigate.
Yeah.
And there's part of me thinks we need to highlight that. You know, yes, the Scottish Government are trying to run a country, but they're also mitigating continuously against poor policies that are not decided in this country.
Yes, and I think you're right. They need to be much more vocal about what they're doing in that respect. Just keep on saying it. I mean, they must know the amount of money that they're putting aside to mitigate. So they should say what it is, what they're mitigating, and just say it and say it and say it. Because everyone forgets. You know, you forget about the bedroom tax. You forget about the two-child payment. I mean, not if you're on the receiving end of it, but you know. But the rest of us do. And they just need to keep on saying it because it's a massive amount of money and it kind of gets lost.
Well, people take it for granted, don't they? They just think, and then the flip side of it is that you get people down south saying, oh, well, you're all scoundrels because you get your prescriptions for free and your tuition fees and all these things that they say, because that's obviously what's been fed to them. You know?
That's the narrative.
Exactly, yeah.
I had this argument years ago with a friend's aunt who basically called us scroungers, saying, you know, oh, you scrounge and you get your prescriptions for free. And when I explained that, no, they costed it, and actually to do it as a kind of means tested was going to cost more. By the time they'd calculated, well, there's certain people who will get prescriptions free anyway, whether it's people under 16, pregnant women, people with long-term conditions. But to set up an administration system to charge for it was going to cost more than just actually providing the medication free at source.
Exactly. So that's PIC. That's quite a roundup we've done then. We'll just have to see if that is the Labour Party's poll tax. I suspect it might be. Shall we move on? Yes, fingers crossed. Shall we move on now to not the most cheerful of topics, but defence? And, you know, we covered in the last two podcasts we've done, the last 2 weeks podcasts, we've had discussions about, do we actually need this build-up of arms, or is that just good for the arms providers? And of course, Labour have become born-again nuclear power supporters. So we had a conversation with David Kelly from Scottish CND, and he explained to us that nuclear power and nuclear weapons are not different things. They're part of the same industry. And we were absolutely taken aback by the explanation he gave us. So here he is.
I have a real bee in my bonnet about how there is no civil nuclear power industry. Right? There is a nuclear industry. Our nuclear missiles, our nuclear bombs require tritium as part of the fuse. And the only place you get tritium is from a fusion civil reactor. Right now, until late this year, we've had a supply from a special type of Canadian nuclear reactor for all of Britain's tritium. And the last of those reactors shuts down this year. So we need in Britain a new range of nuclear power stations in order to make the tritium to power our bombs. Tritium only has a half-life of 12 years. That's why there's a shuttle service of nuclear warheads between Coolport and Birkhead, is because the tritium needs replenished. But essentially, without a new range of nuclear power stations, we will not have a so-called nuclear deterrent. And we know that the ones that are years late coming in, and, you know, Sizewell C, which is, you know, 10 years late and 200% over budget, whatever it is, aren't equipped. They need to have a special type of design of tritium capture facilities around the central core. And our small modular reactors that Rolls-Royce are proposing would be perfect to design that. So it's a major challenge that if you don't have tritium from a civilian nuclear power station, you do not have hydrogen bombs. You can still make the old-fashioned Hiroshima bomb just from uranium, the sort of thing, for example, Iran could make without having its own nuclear power station. It could still refine uranium to the point where it could make a bomb. But it can't make a plutonium-based bomb without a nuclear power station, and you can't trigger a hydrogen bomb without tritium. We actually have the same number of fusion as we have fission bombs because it's so difficult to make a hydrogen bomb go off. You need a conventional atomic bomb as a trigger.
Yeah.
Right, so our atomic warheads have essentially 2 bombs in them, or 3 bombs in them. They've the huge explosive charge to set off the atomic bomb, which creates the neutron flush through the tritium into the hydrogen bomb component. It's engineering and scientific genius, and we could have been solving world hunger.
Such a powerful explanation that I just found that horrifying, that sort of explanation. Julie's saying that was a brilliant podcast. The guys were really good, weren't they? I think I thought the campaign they were doing was really helpful. And still on the defence line, this again, my hapless MP was in Westminster. He was put up to ask a question purely so that the minister could give the Scottish Government a kicking, is my opinion.
The welcome announcement by the Prime Minister of the last couple of weeks of an increase in defence spending creates both an opportunity and a challenge for the department as well as for the whole skills system in this country. Will the Secretary of State please outline how she will work with the Ministry of Defence to make sure that gap is filled, and in particular how she will make sure that the Scottish Government in Edinburgh actually takes proper action on defence skills as it's failed to do so over the last 17 years?
My honourable friend is right. The first set of statistics released under the Labour government shows apprenticeship starts, participation and achievements all on the up compared to the same period under the Tories. We celebrated by going further and faster to cut red tape, so up to 10,000 more apprentices can achieve each year. What a clear contrast to the failures we saw under the Tories for 14 years and the continued failure of the SNP. It is time for change in Scotland, and only Labour can deliver that change.
Clearly planned but poorly delivered response. You know, you're thinking if he's been set up, if he's setting it up to do it, at least be able to deliver it properly.
Exactly, not just stand there reading it off your blooming notes. Oh,
I think the counterpoint between the one we've just had with this, these are the horrors of nuclear weapons. Isn't it great that we've got more defence spending? Yes. Now, Marlene, you had something in his constituency. Includes Rosyth.
Well, those are 6 of, I think there are 7 nuclear sub-docked in the naval yards at Rosyth, waiting to be decommissioned. But they've been there waiting for a long time. That I just took that straight off Google Earth. You can just try zoom in, go to Rosyth. Where are they? Oh yeah, there they are. There they are. There. And down in the naval base to the south of England, Portsmouth, there's about another 13 or so. So they're very old. They're probably the subs that had, Polaris missiles in them. They're very old, but they're still there. The reactor's still there. Probably, lots of people could get apprenticeships. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and maybe instead of coming up with staged questions for the minister to mangle, perhaps he could do something about clearing those out, getting rid of them from Rosyth.
But there's lots of apprenticeships that could be started.
Yeah.
We're looking at insulating homes. Why do they not get people that are trained up in that? Things that are actually beneficial to humans, to the planet. It doesn't have to be in the sort of war and defence and destruction of things.
Yeah, we've got a clip from Mrs. Dorothea Barron, who was a veteran of the D-Day landings, and I think she's absolutely right when she's saying, really put women in charge and we wouldn't have half this problem.
Would you give to females serving in the armed forces today?
Nobody bloody well wins a war. Everybody loses. Any war. Nobody wins. Absolutely nobody. Even the victors have suffered, and they've lost their loved ones. War is useless. You've got to talk.
What does it mean to you to see women serving in the armed forces
I'm
today?
very much in admiration of them. We need women in there. We need a sobering voice. And women are, I'm afraid, much more sensible than men. I know my sons-in-law will curl up in horror at that, but they are. Women see round corners and think round corners. Men just see in a straight line.
It's very good, isn't it, about seeing round corners? I mean, I expect a few men can see round corners, but it's a really good way to describe it, isn't it?
That's the voice of experience as well. She was there. She's not glorifying war. She was in it.
When you old male veterans that talk about war, horrified by it as well, and it's not the people who've planned the war that are having the argument that actually are out there fighting it.
I noticed on her name badge she had the suffragette colours. So whether I don't quite know where that meeting happened, but I did notice the colours.
Yes, quite a lady, obviously. Right, shall we move on from rotting submarines in naval yards? Let's talk a bit more about ferries, because as we know, ferries are terrible, terrible things.
And will the Deputy First Minister deliver a statement to Parliament on what the future is for Ferguson Marine and the hundreds of jobs that depend upon it?
Deputy First Minister. Of course, the hundreds of jobs have only been protected because of the actions of this government, and the constant negativity from the Conservatives, using words like catastrophic, does nothing to help the yard secure work on the open market, and it is extremely frustrating to hear that. The bottom line here is that Ferguson Marine are focused on completing the Glen Rosa. We await, as the committee does, I know, an update from the yard in terms of timescales. The second focus is their commercial strategy, which was never only predicated on one contract, because that would be no commercial strategy. The point here is that they have additional work coming in, which we hope to be secured in April. There are other contracts that they are very hopeful of securing shortly, which David Dishon referred to in his commentary yesterday. And there are other opportunities around the small vessel replacement programme phase 2. She will know that extensive analysis and legal advice indicated that a direct award of this current SVRP contract to Ferguson Marine would have introduced substantial risk, perhaps creating the worst of both worlds, where the boats don't get delivered to the islanders and Ferguson Marine don't get the contract because it ends up in the courts. And that is what we have tried to avoid and why we agreed to open procurement.
Thank you. Claire Baker.
Thank you. Presiding Officer, it is a sorry state of affairs when a shipyard, nationalised by the SNP government, is not competitive and is unable to successfully bid for work that was widely recognised to be a good fit for Ferguson's. To secure work, Ferguson's need investment and support as well as stability. Does the Scottish Government believe that the current procurement process for our ferry fleet is fit for purpose in light of the failure to secure the work for Ferguson's?
Deputy First Minister.
I find that question quite remarkable, because the member has essentially told me that they don't think the procurement process is fit for purpose because Ferguson Marine didn't win. And the point here is that a procurement process needs to be fair, it needs to inspire confidence. And if there had been an alternative decision made by CMAL, who are acting independently of ministers, and it's important to stress that point, I think the questions would have been what else ministers have been doing. The bottom line here is the member has asked for about investment support, and yes, we have agreed £14.2 million to invest in equipment, to invest in the yard, so that it can compete on a global basis. She talked about stability, and the commercial strategy is very clear about the potential work that the yard can secure. The yard has secured additional work, and it would be nice to see the yard being recognised for the work that it has secured to date whilst it completes the Glen Rosa. And perhaps if we talked more about the skills and the ability of the yard here, instead of constantly talking it down, they might have greater potential to win that work.
Well said, that woman.
Yeah. Very good, isn't she? Is that going to be the end of the Ferries story now? Can we hope for that? No? Yeah.
Well, I don't think the Tories are ever going to let it drop. And in fact, Russell Finlay had a good go at making some mileage at FMQs. And to give him his due, John Swinney was absolutely having none of it.
That doesn't much concern Russell Finlay, because he represents a party that has destroyed the industrial base of Scotland under the awful leadership of the Conservative governments in the United Kingdom. And what this government is about working with the workforce to make sure that we can secure the future of the yard. Now, at the heart of Russell Finlay's question is a complete contradiction, because on the one hand, the government is being accused of rigging the process, and now the government is being accused of not rigging the process to make sure the vessels can go to Ferguson's.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this just demonstrates that Russell Finlay is scraping the bottom of the barrel of political insults. He does it week on week in this Parliament, and it's a disgrace to the Conservative Party.
Russell Finlay.
Sorry, First Minister, we don't want the SNP to fix contracts for Ferguson's. We want them to fix Ferguson's so that they can win contracts fairly and squarely. Because Scottish shipyards should be able to build ferries here in Scotland. After nationalisation, the SNP had a duty to get Ferguson's back into a position to win contracts legitimately, and they have failed to do so.
Yes.
And the First Minister's fingerprints are all over this scandal from the very beginning. He signed off on a dodgy deal that's let down islanders, taxpayers and shipyard workers who face an uncertain future.
First Minister.
President Officer, there would not be a Ferguson's Yard trading just now if I had not intervened over 10 years ago to try to secure the future of the yard, and I make no apology for doing that over all those years. Now, I want to tell Parliament what Russell Finlay really thinks, because he's not been straight with Parliament about all these questions today. This is what Russell Finlay said before. He called Ferguson Marine a terrible drain on the public finances. He called my government's support recklessly throwing taxpayers' money away. He also, I'm not finished yet. I'm not finished yet. I've got lots more to share with Parliament today. He said that the non-stop squandering of cash cannot go on. So what we know today is that Russell Finlay has specialised in talking down the yard at Ferguson's. We know that he's come here today to just demonstrate the political opportunism that we hear from him every single week. And we know why he's doing it. We know why he's doing it, because the Conservative Party are being hammered by reform, and Russell Finlay is on his way out with most of his colleagues with him. Thank goodness, and good riddance to the lot of them.
Oh, that was good.
We're going to go on and have a look at Reform UK, seeing he mentioned them then. But see the folk who are listening, does anybody know anybody who is thinking of voting for Reform UK? Because if so, why? I do not understand what the attraction is to anybody living in Scotland for Reform UK. The next clip we've got comes from a programme called It's UK in a Changing Europe, and they were talking about Reform UK and their election results. But there was just a little snippet where they mentioned their prospects in Scotland.
I do think if you look at the map as well of reform support in 2024, it overlaps a lot with the map of UKIP in 2015. And in some respects, I think that will be a disappointment for them because they needed to sort of expand their coalition from where they were back then. I think two relatively bright spots from then that may be relevant for our politics going forward, though, were that they did do rather well in Wales and they did do much better than UKIP ever did in Scotland. Both of those countries have devolved elections under a rather different electoral system, and both of those countries also, quite significantly, already have a five-party system. So you end up with some very fragmented politics and the potential for reform to get seats on an even lower threshold of the vote. And of course, in both of those countries, there's a kind of deep-rooted historical antipathy to the Conservative Party, who are seen as something of an English party. Now, UKIP was seen in the same terms, particularly in Scotland, but maybe if Reform can position themselves as a party of the socially conservative right that isn't associated with Westminster in England, they could potentially displace the Conservatives in these places. So that was a bright spot, I think.
I wouldn't exactly call it a bright spot, but yeah, okay, fair enough.
Well, they've actually got UK in the title, so how does he think that's going to... Yeah. But you had some information on their polling, Marlene, didn't you? Do you want to...
I do,
that?
I do. This is from recent polling, and what I'm going to say is largely cribbed, have to admit, from John Curtis, who did an interview on it a couple of weeks back. So at the general election, if you remember back to July, that this is a Scottish breakdown. Labour 35%, the SNP had 30%, but first past the post, Labour smashed through. SNP were down to whatever it is, nine MPs. So that was what it was at last July. And the polling that's been done at the moment, actually, for again, this is just Scotland. So for this one, Labour support has slipped in Scotland. It's actually at about only half of, it had 35%. It's down to almost about half of that. And it's gone about 12, 13%'s gone to the SNP, another chunk like that's gone to the Tory party, another chunk like that's gone to Lib Dems, and a similar chunk has gone to Reform UK. When people, so they're talking to Labour supporters who voted Labour in the general election and saying, how would you vote if there was an election now? So they've really, really slipped back. And that has, of course, that has an effect on what might happen, a likely Scottish vote now. John Curtis sort of puts it in terms of the effect that Reform's having is that they're fracturing the unionist vote. So Reform's picking up votes from Labour, former Labour supporters, but of course they're also picking up votes from Tory supporters. So they're kind of like coming into Scottish electorate with a wedge. They're bringing a wedge in of folk who say, we're going to vote for Reform UK. Goodness knows why, but they're saying that. But most of that wedge is made up of former Labour and former Tory voters. There's a very small amount of people who voted SNP last July who are saying they're going to vote for Reform UK. Why? God knows. But it's only 2%. So their slice of the voting isn't really being affected, whereas Labour's is down, Tories are down, and Reform's down. And yeah, Curtis was saying he thinks because of that kind of wedge effect and fracturing the unionist vote by having another party there now, that it's possible that the SNP could, even on 35% of the vote, could get a majority of constituency seats. Well, such a big majority of constituency seats that it would never be overturned by what happens when they count up the regional votes. So, yeah, it's quite something. And I mean, there's no doubt that there's going to be Reform UK MSPs. That's going to happen. They'll pick up seats in the list.
They might act as an effective kind of coalition with the Tories because there's hardly a fact paper between them, is there?
Yeah, and I mean that one I put up now, it actually goes back to about 4 years, but the most recent, that big most recent peak that you can see for the red one for Labour, that's what happened in the general election, and since then they've just gone downhill. SNP's recovered, Conservatives have gone down, and Reform's gone up. And the Greens and the Lib Dems kind of chunter along about 8-10%, something like that.
Unfortunately, just looking at those figures, we're nowhere near having a majority of independents vote, though, are we?
Well, no, what I've just said is the opposite of what John Curtis said.
I mean,
just the opposite of that.
No, maybe in seat numbers, but just if in share of the vote, if you've got 35% for SNP and 8% for the Greens, that's less than half. In percentage terms.
And there was a time when the SNP were polling at about 50%, but in any system that's really out of the ordinary. You just don't expect that.
When people were talking about 2026 being a de facto referendum, well, that's a de facto lost referendum if that's on that polling.
Well, I don't think anyone talks about it like that any longer, actually.
Well, we'll see.
What the important thing is what do you end up in Holyrood with a majority of MSPs who want, who want independence, and we've had it before, and I'm sure that some of the folk watching, and no doubt there's going to be a couple of comments. I think there's been one already to the effect of, well, they had their chance in Holyrood and they didn't take it. Actually, I think it's complicated because there's all sorts of external circumstances to take into account as well. But it is true, if there's another Holyrood that gets a majority of MSPs in favour of independence, something's got to shift. And maybe it'll be the UN, maybe it'll be pressure from the UN, don't know. Maybe it's just got to be us as well. We've got to get out there doing it.
But again, I see, the last time, as you say, well, SNP were polling at like around about 50%, but even with the 35%, we can still get a majority of seats along with Greens and other independents. But you can see Westminster turning around, but you didn't get the share. And you look at the difference in the voting systems, which a lot of people still don't understand. I mean, the last wee clip you were showing about the four of them talking about reform and saying, well, in Wales and Scotland, they have a 5-party system. Because in Westminster, they have a 2-party system, really and truly. That's what it is. It's either Labour or it's Tories. It's Labour or it's Tories, and it swings, how long they get to stay at one and another. And actually, I prefer our system because it is fairer. It's far from perfect, but it's fairer. At least you think there's more of a kind of representation of the population.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, totally. And it forces them to work more collaboratively, even if they don't.
That's it.
Yeah. So Marlene had been doing some research, though, on what Reform UK are actually offering. And she's put together, with the help of the Radical Independence Campaign, Rick had come up with a leaflet saying Reform doesn't do what it says on the tin. So this is Marlene's little summary, which I think is brilliant and quite worrying.
The Radical Independence Campaign folks say Reform is not what it says on the tin. Nigel Farage, is he a fraud? They think so. He's certainly over in the States a lot, campaigning for Trump. That is enough to make you balk. Reform, it's the same old right-wing British nationalism. Not even a party, it's a not-for-profit company. Reform says patients first, rapid care, cut waste and NHS to be proud of. Again, aye, that'll be right, with a US-style health system and tax breaks for private medicine. They say, scrap net zero, cut bills, restore growth. Aye, that'll be right. Tax green energy, fast-track oil and gas. Planet? Well, planet. They say Reform UK will unlock the major opportunities of Brexit. Oh, that'll be right. And they say they'll back risk takers and wealth creators. Aye, that'll be right. We know who they are.
I think that's excellent. I'm going to put that on our TikTok, actually.
I tried doing that. It was good.
We're going to give the link to the Radical Independence folk, because it was their leaflet it was based on. They might want to share it out there. And actually, I might just put it as a separate little post on our YouTube, and then that's something, if people want to pick it up and share it, then please do.
Even it's like was the FFS.
With Marlene. Canada. I love Canada, and Canada are being brilliant at the moment in standing up to Trump. And we've just got two little clips to finish off with. The first one, I think this is brilliant, and it's Mike Myers, who is Canadian, managed to come up with just a throwaway phrase that every Canadian understands. Nobody else really does. And it seems to have unified the whole country. This is from an American YouTube show called The Midas Touch, very anti-Trump. And the host was chatting to a Canadian politician, and he'd seen Mike Myers make this gesture, so he wanted to know what it was all about.
But then he also gave a gesture that Canadians understood what it means, pointing to his elbow and whispering elbows up, which I know our Canadian audience saw, and it may have been lost on the American audience. Tell us about that rallying call and what you're hearing in Canada.
Elbows up refers to Gordie Howe from Floral, Saskatchewan, who's leader of the production line of the Detroit Red Wings. Gordie was the sweetest guy on the planet, but when Gordie did elbows up, it meant people got black eyes and people lost teeth. So last night, or Saturday night, when Mike Myers is on Saturday Night Live, and when Mike mouths elbows up, that message to Canadians was, don't be polite, don't hope for the best, you do what you have to do, and do it the way Gordie would do it, which means people are going to get black eyes, people are going to lose teeth. And so for the doofus leaders like J.D. Vance and Pete Navarro and the Trump gang, they're going to be in for a real shock. Mike sent the message, and that message, I've been hearing it all day. Elbows up, elbows up, elbows up. I've been talking to like capitalist businessmen who travel the world who tell me never going back, never spending a dime, elbows up. So Mike sent the message on SNL last night. It was the secret code, but the code has been well received, and everybody in Canada is feeling really good about Mike Myers right now.
That's so clever, isn't it? We need that phrase. We need something that unifies Scotland, gets us all going. And then the last one is this. I think you found this, Marlene, didn't you?
Hi, Americans. Are you tired of being scared that you'll be shot by other Americans? Are you being crushed by something called medical debt? Do you wish you could sew your own country's flag on your backpack when traveling? Do you think that everyone should have the right to be safe and in charge of their own bodies? Even women? Relax. Now there's a solution. Join Canada. That's right. Just contact Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada and let them know you and maybe your whole state would like to immigrate to the true north strong and free. Join Canada. It's not America. And we like it that way. Offer not applicable to some of the weirder states.
I wonder which ones he classifies as the weirder states.
I mean, they're normally so sort of polite and laid back, but I thought that was fabulous. Oh yes, kilts up. That's got a whole different kind of connotations.
I still like mon then. Mon then.
Mon then, yes.
You can say it nicely. Yes. You can say it nicely, or you can give it a mon then.
Well, if anybody's got any suggestions, put them in the comments. We'll see what we can do to share them. That's it for this month. Chicken sounds like that one.
Hod my jacket for me.
Thanks for joining us, folks. As ever, enjoyed your comments, and we'll catch you all later.
Yep.
Elbows up.
Elbows up.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can click the little bell and you get a reminder whenever we put out a new episode, which is every Friday.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website. And we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.
And we'll catch you later. Bye now.